My name is Brooke Bennett. I was 33 years old the day my sister handed me a dress the color of a traffic cone and called it an honor. 7 bridesmaids stood in the sunlit suite, sliding into identical lavender gowns, fitted, floor-length, beautiful. I stood in a side hallway holding a bright orange polyester sack labeled 2XL. I wear a small, 3 sizes too big. The fabric bunched around me like a deflated parachute. I found a safety pin in my travel kit and stabbed it through the waist. It bent. The fabric slipped anyway. When I asked my sister Sloane about it, she tilted her head and smiled. It was the only one left. My mother told me to stop being dramatic. The photographer kept steering me to the back of every frame. And by the time the cake was cut, my sister ran out of her own wedding because one woman in the 3rd row had been paying attention when nobody else bothered to. But I'll get there. I'm a structural engineer. I co-own a small firm in Raleigh. Nothing glamorous, but it's mine. Built from a community college transfer, 3 years of waitressing at a steakhouse, and a state university degree I paid for myself. Dollar by dollar. Tip by tip. My sister Sloane is 4 years younger. She's always been the sun in our family's solar system, charming, photogenic, magnetic. She was marrying Daniel Whitlock, whose family owned half the vineyards in the Shenandoah Valley. Our mother, Diane, had been planning this wedding the way generals plan invasions. Every centerpiece, every toast, every seating chart calibrated for maximum impression on the Whitlock side. I was included in the bridal party because not including me would look suspicious. A bride who excludes her own sister raises questions. So I was in, technically. I got the text 3 weeks before the wedding. Bridesmaid number 8, Sloane wrote. No emoji, no warmth, just a slot number. I should have paid attention to that number. 8 bridesmaids, 7 lavender gowns. The math was already decided before I ever RSVP'd. The Whitlocks were old Virginia money. The kind of family that names buildings after grandparents and keeps a land trust instead of a savings account. Daniel was decent, quiet, kind, the sort of man who opened doors and remembered names and seemed genuinely baffled by how lucky he was. His mother was pleasant in a careful, polished way. His father talked about horses. But the real center of gravity was his grandmother, Margaret Whitlock. She was 79. Small, silver-haired, with posture like a steel beam and eyes that missed nothing. She sat in the front row at the rehearsal dinner with her hands folded over a pearl-handled cane, watching everything, the florist, the groomsmen, the way Sloane touched Daniel's arm. She noticed me once when I was refilling my own water glass because the server had skipped our table. She held my gaze for 3 seconds. Then she looked at Sloane. Then back at me. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was too busy surviving the evening, seated between Aunt Renee, who kept telling me to smile more, and a groomsman who asked me twice if I was the sister with the issues. I found out later that phrase came from Sloane herself. I arrived at the bridal suite at 8 a.m. sharp. The room was a dream. Champagne on ice, 7 garment bags hanging like lavender soldiers, a makeup artist with a ring light, monogrammed robes for every bridesmaid. My name wasn't on a robe. Oh, Brooke, you're getting ready down the hall, Sloane said, not looking up from her phone. Small room. Your dress is in there. The small room was a linen closet with a mirror propped against folding chairs. Inside the garment bag, the orange dress. Not burnt orange. Not terracotta. Safety cone orange. Bright synthetic polyester that smelled like a shipping container. I held it up. The shoulders drooped past my arms. The waist could have fit 2 of me. I walked back to the suite. Sloane, this is 3 sizes too big. She looked at me with that camera-ready smile. It was the only one left. Behind her, Aunt Renee adjusted her perfect lavender sash. Stop being dramatic, Renee said. It's not about you. Not one of those 7 women said a word. I found my mother in the hallway. Mom, the dress doesn't fit. There are spare lavender gowns on the rack inside. Can we swap? She didn't look up from the flower girl's sash. Those are for emergencies. This is an emergency. She finally met my eyes. Her expression was the one she used on me as a child. Patient, practiced, closed. Brooke, don't ruin your sister's day. Nobody's looking at you anyway. She walked away. I stood in that hallway in orange polyester, two spare lavender gowns hanging 10 feet behind me, and understood something I hadn't fully admitted to myself before. This wasn't an accident. Let me tell you about my grandmother, Ruth Draper. She raised 5 kids in a house with 1 bathroom and a garden that fed the block. She quilted. She baked cornbread that made grown men cry. And when she got sick, emphysema, then a stroke that took her left side, I was the one who moved in. I was 28, 2 years into my first engineering job. I rearranged my entire life around her medications and her physical therapy appointments. 3 years. I bathed her. I read to her. I held her hand on the night she forgot where she was. Sloan visited twice. Once for Thanksgiving, once when she needed Gran to co-sign a car loan. Gran died at 84 on a Tuesday, her hand in mine, the quilt she'd made for my college graduation, folded across her lap. I mention this because of something I overheard at the rehearsal dinner. Sloan was telling Daniel's aunt, a thin woman in emeralds, about nursing my grandmother through her final days. She used those exact words, final days, like she'd been there. I told myself I'd misheard. That's the thing about being the responsible one. You give people credit they haven't earned because the alternative means admitting your family is something you can't fix. I stood at the far end of the bridal line, half a step behind the last lavender gown. From the guest's perspective, I was a smudge of orange at the edge of a lavender painting. Orange polyester in afternoon sunlight catches like a hazard vest. I wore nude pumps because nobody had told me the heel color. The 2XL hem dragged around my ankles like a deflated hot air balloon. I saw Margaret Whitlock in the 3rd row. She was watching me, not the procession. Her expression wasn't pity or amusement. It was assessment. After the ceremony, the photographer organized us for group portraits. Lavender in front, he said, then looked at me, then his shot list. Orange if you could step to the back row behind the groomsmen. I moved. He shot 6 frames. Could you shift left? You're catching a weird reflection. I shifted. 4 more frames, maybe just. He gestured vaguely toward the hedge. I stepped out of the frame entirely. Nobody called me back. I stood next to a boxwood topiary and watched them take 32 photos without me. My mother appeared once, whispered something to the photographer, and he nodded. After that, he never tried to include me again. The cocktail hour was on the East Terrace. String lights, a raw bar, a quartet playing Sinatra. I found a high table near the railing and nursed sparkling water. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was standing 8 feet away when I heard Sloan say it. I put myself through school, she was telling a silver-haired woman in green, Daniel's great aunt. Community college first, then state. Waitressing nights. Nobody handed me anything. My hand tightened around my glass. Those were my words. That was my life. Sloan had dropped out of a private liberal arts college after 3 semesters and spent 2 years finding herself in Charleston on her parents' money. She had never waited a table in her life. And the engineering work? The great aunt asked. Structural engineering, Sloan said without blinking. Small firm stuff, but it's so rewarding to build something real. Structural engineering. My degree. My firm. My 12-hour days reading blueprints and crawling under bridges with a flashlight and a measuring tape. She was standing in a $5,000 wedding gown telling strangers she was me. I confronted her by the Macaron Tower 20 minutes later. Kept my voice low. I just heard you tell Daniel's aunt you put yourself through engineering school. You didn't. That's my degree. That's my career. She picked up a macaron, studied it, set it back. You're imagining things. I heard you say structural engineering. I heard you say community college. She turned to me with the expression she reserved for waiters who brought the wrong drink, amused, faintly pitying, and delivered her verdict just loud enough for a nearby cousin to hear. You're standing at my wedding in a dress that doesn't fit, making accusations. Do you hear yourself? Then lower. Just for me. This is why nobody takes you seriously. Look at you. She gestured at the orange dress, the safety-pinned waist, the bunched fabric, then turned and walked back to the Whitlock table like nothing had happened. She hadn't denied a single word. She just used the dress to make me look unstable for noticing. That's not carelessness, that's architecture. My mother cut me off near the coat check. Fundraiser smile, locked jaw. Whatever you said to your sister, stop. She's telling people she has my degree, Mom. She pulled me behind a column. The Whitlocks have certain expectations. Sloan needed to present a certain picture. She told them she's a structural engineer. She told them what they needed to hear. She smoothed her lapel. And she told them about you, too. Enough so they'd understand why you two aren't close. The air left my lungs. What did she tell them about me? That you've struggled, that you have difficulties, that the distance between you is because of your issues. She said the word issues the way you'd say termites. Something unfortunate. Best handled quietly. Mom, I own a company. I have a professional engineering license. Nobody here needs to know that. She checked her reflection in the brass elevator panel. Behave, Brooke. This is the most important day of your sister's life. Don't be the reason it falls apart. She walked back toward the ballroom. I leaned against the column and stared at the ceiling. Ornate, plaster, hand-painted clouds. Someone's idea of heaven. My family hadn't just excluded me from the photos. They had rewritten me entirely. I was the cover story, the troubled sister, the excuse, the reason Sloan could claim a life she never lived. The orange dress wasn't a mistake. It was a costume. I was seated at table 14, near the kitchen door, wedged between two empty chairs and a couple I didn't know. Turned out to be the caterer's parents. Daniel found me there during the salad course. He'd loosened his tie, flushed with the weight of what he'd just committed to in front of 200 people. Brooke, I just wanted to say thank you for being here. I know it wasn't easy, given your situation. What do you mean? Sloan told me about the estrangement. The struggles. I think it took real courage to show up. He meant it kindly. He was a good man, repeating a lie he'd been fed like dinner. She said you might be sensitive today, he added. So if the seating or anything feels off, please don't take it personally. He squeezed my hand, stood up, and walked back to the head table where my sister sat in a cloud of white organza, laughing at something the best man said. Table 14, orange dress, the sister with the issues. I wasn't the guest. I was a prop. I decided I'd leave during the toasts. Get my jacket, find my car, text a polite goodbye from the parking lot. Clean exit. No scene. No ammunition for the dramatic sister narrative. I was reaching for my jacket in the coat check when a voice came from the bench near the window. You're the one who finished engineering at NC State, aren't you? I turned. Margaret Whitlock sat on the bench, pearl-handled cane across her knees, looking comfortable, like she'd been waiting. Not specifically for me. Just for the moment she knew was coming. Structural engineering. You transferred from Wake Tech. Finished at NC State, class of 2017. She said it the way you'd confirm a shipping address. Matter of fact, precise. My pulse picked up. How do you know that? I'm 79, dear. I don't sign checks without reading the fine print. She studied me the way she'd studied the florist at the rehearsal. Not judging, cataloging. Interesting dress, she said. It was the only one left, I said. The words came out flat and automatic, and for the first time I heard how absurd they sounded spoken out loud. Margaret's mouth twitched. Not a smile. Something closer to confirmation. Was it? Not a question. She tapped her cane twice against the tile. I think you should stay for the toast, Brooke. You'll want to be here for what comes after. She stood, adjusted her shawl, and walked back toward the ballroom at a pace that suggested she had never once been late for anything that mattered. I stood in that hallway a long time. My car keys were in my hand. Every reasonable bone in my body said, drive home, but Margaret's voice stayed. I put the jacket back. I walked toward the reception hall. Aunt Renee intercepted me at the entrance and steered me back to table 14. Sit down, Brooke. Stop being dramatic. That phrase again. It had followed me all day like a shadow wearing my face. I sat, straightened the orange dress over my knees, felt the safety pin shift against my ribs. Then I reached under my chair for my phone, and my hand closed around a phone that wasn't mine. Same case. Black silicone. But the lock screen showed a photo of Sloan and my mother at a spa day, Diane's phone. A notification banner lit the screen. Bennett Girls Group Chat. 3 new messages. I should have put it down face first and pretended I never saw it. Instead, I swiped. The thread went back weeks. I scrolled. And my hand stopped being steady. Renee, 3 weeks ago. What about the orange one in the clearance section? It's hideous and it's huge. Diane, perfect. She'll look like she doesn't belong, which she doesn't. Sloan, make sure the photographer knows to keep her in the back. If she's in the front, Daniel's family will wonder why she looks like that. Diane, already handled. There was more. Screenshots of everything Sloan had told the Whitlocks. A narrative so thorough it read like a dossier. My career, hers. My degree, hers. Gran's final days, hers. And I had become the older sister who had a breakdown after our grandmother died and has been estranged ever since. One line from Sloan stopped my scrolling, told them I nursed Gran through hospice. They loved it. Margaret, especially. I set the phone face down on the chair. I had options. I could stand up and read every word of that thread to 200 people. I could pull Sloan outside. I could forward the entire conversation to Daniel and let the truth do its own demolition. I did none of those things. Gran Ruth Draper spent her last 3 years in a twin bed in my guest room, watching cardinals through the window I had positioned her bed beside. Her memory deserved better than a screaming match at a vineyard. If I made a scene, I'd become exactly what Sloan had described, the dramatic sister, the unstable one, the woman in the orange dress who ruined everything. I'd prove the lie by trying to disprove it. So I sat. I placed Diane's phone back on the chair. I folded my hands in my lap, and I waited. The DJ dimmed the lights. Tara, Sloane's college friend, maid of honor, raised the microphone. The toast was polished, rehearsed. You could tell by the pauses, the way she hit each emotional beat, like a metronome. She talked about Sloane's incredible journey, her resilience, the woman who put herself through school with her own 2 hands, who built a career from nothing, who nursed her beloved grandmother through her final days. Every word was a brick from the house Sloan had built on top of my life. I sat at table 14 in my orange dress and listened to a stranger eulogize my biography under my sister's name. The room was wrapped. Daniel wiped his eyes. Diane beamed from the head table. The Whitlock relatives nodded, approving, impressed, satisfied. To Sloan, Tara said, raising her glass, the strongest woman I know. 200 people lifted their champagne flutes. I lifted my water glass. Across the room, Margaret Whitlock did not lift her glass. She was watching me. Not Sloan, not Tara, not Daniel. Me, reading something in my face, or maybe reading the absence of something. No outrage, no tears, no traumatic exit. Just a woman in a wrong-colored dress at the wrong table, hearing her own life story told under someone else's name and choosing not to shatter the glass in her hand. Margaret held my gaze for 3 seconds. Then she set down her napkin, placed both hands on her cane, and began to stand. When Margaret Whitlock stood up, the room noticed. In a family where money was quiet and power was inherited, Margaret was the last signature, the one that made everything official. Conversations faded, heads turned. The DJ hovered over his laptop, uncertain. Even Tara stepped sideways, yielding the floor by instinct. Margaret didn't approach the microphone. She didn't raise her voice. She took her grandson's cousin by the arm and began walking, not toward the head table, not toward the dance floor, toward the back of the room. Toward table 14, the room tracked her like a compass follows north. You could hear the rustle of napkins, the creak of chairs turning, the soft intake of breath from people who understood that Margaret Whitlock did not take walks during receptions. Sloan noticed. I watched her face change. The smile stayed, but the muscles beneath it recalibrated. She touched Daniel's arm. He looked where Margaret was heading, then looked at Sloan with a question forming behind his eyes. Diane half rose from her chair. Renee went still, champagne flute suspended midway to her lips. I sat in my orange dress at the back of the room and watched a 79-year-old woman cross a ballroom the way a verdict crosses a courtroom. Slowly, inevitably, with the full weight of what comes next. I only learned what Margaret had done in the weeks before the wedding much later. The Whitlocks had a tradition. Before any marriage involving the family trust, Margaret personally reviewed the union, not with lawyers or investigators, but with phone calls and the social network of a woman who had been a pillar of Shenandoah Valley society for 50 years. She made 3 calls. The first was to the director of the care facility where Gran had received home health support. The director remembered Brooke Bennett, The granddaughter who came every day, who brought cornbread, who slept in the chair beside the hospital bed during the final week. She did not remember a Sloan. The second was simpler. She found NC State's public commencement archive online. Brooke Bennett, Bachelor of Science, Structural Engineering, 2017. No Sloan Bennett on any list, any year. The third call was to Janet Hubbard, my grandmother's neighbor, 40 years, who told Margaret everything. That Sloan hadn't visited Gran more than twice in 3 years. That I had managed the medications and the hospice paperwork. That after the funeral, Sloan had taken the pearl earrings from Gran's dresser and never mentioned them again. Margaret didn't confront Sloan before the wedding. She wanted to see how the family behaved in public, whether the lie was Sloan's alone or something the entire Bennett family had agreed to stage. The orange dress answered that question. The photographer answered it again. And Diane's careful management of every frame, every seat, every word I was permitted to say answered it completely. By the time Margaret stood up at that reception, she already knew everything. She just needed the room to see it too. Margaret reached table 14. The young cousin released her arm and stepped back. The ballroom was silent, the particular silence of 200 people watching something they don't quite understand but know they shouldn't miss. I started to stand. "Please don't," she said. She lowered herself into the empty chair beside me, the one that had sat empty all night because nobody wanted to be near the sister in the orange dress. She set her cane against the table. Then she reached over and took my hand. Her fingers were thin and cool. Her grip was precise, the way you'd hold something you intended to keep. The chandelier light caught the orange polyester and turned it vivid, almost electric. For 3 hours, that dress had been a costume designed to make me disappear. Now, with Margaret Whitlock holding my hand in front of every guest, every Whitlock cousin, every carefully arranged lavender bridesmaid, the dress was a spotlight. You couldn't look away from it. Diane got there first. She crossed the ballroom in 4 seconds, heels clicking, pearl buttons flashing, fundraiser smile at full wattage. "Mother Whitlock, how wonderful. This is my eldest. She's a bit shy, keeps to herself, you know how." Margaret looked at Diane. Just looked. She didn't speak. She didn't raise a hand. She turned her head, met Diane's eyes, and held them. It was the quietest act of authority I have ever witnessed. Diane's sentence died in her throat. Her smile stayed, but her body stopped, 1 foot ahead of the other, frozen mid-stride, like a woman who had walked into a glass door she hadn't seen. "I wasn't finished, dear," Margaret said. Her voice was conversational, but the room heard the steel underneath it, and the room went still. Renee sat back down without a word. Her champagne flute landed on the table with a small, defeated click. Margaret turned back to me, still holding my hand. "Brooke, I'd like to ask you something, and I'd like you to answer honestly, not for me, for my grandson." I nodded. "Did you care for your grandmother during her illness?" "Yes. 3 years. To the end. And your degree? Structural engineering, NC State, that's yours?" "Yes. And the firm in Raleigh, co-owned with my business partner, 6 years." She didn't react with surprise. She reacted with completion. The last piece of a puzzle she had already assembled, clicking into place in front of witnesses. The Whitlock great-aunt in the green wrap, the one Sloan had told about her engineering career, was staring at Sloan with the expression of someone recalculating a number that no longer adds up. Daniel had turned fully in his chair. He wasn't looking at Margaret anymore. He was looking at his bride. "She told us she built that firm," he said, not to anyone in particular, to the air between them. Like a man testing whether the words sounded as wrong out loud as they felt in his head. "She told us a lot of things," Margaret said quietly. Sloan stood up from the head table. The organza of her gown rustled like paper. Her face had the tight porcelain look of something cracking from the inside. Smile still in place, but the architecture beneath it buckling. She laughed. Her cocktail party laugh. Bright, dismissive, designed to make the other person feel small. "Okay, this is getting ridiculous. Brooke has always been jealous of me. This is exactly what I warned everyone about." She reached for Daniel's arm. "Honey, let's go cut the cake. This is our day." Daniel didn't move. "Sloan, she just said the firm is hers." "She's lying. Your grandmother asked her directly?" "Your grandmother asked her directly. Your grandmother is confused. She's 79. The room absorbed that sentence like a sponge absorbs bleach, silently, with visible damage. Every Whitlock in the room had just heard the bride call their family matriarch, confused, and the temperature dropped by 10 degrees. Daniel pulled his arm back slowly, the way you pull your hand from a stove when you realize it's on. Did you tell my family you were a structural engineer? Sloane's smile was holding, but her breathing had changed, faster, shallower, the rhythm of someone whose exits are closing one by one. Daniel, this is our wedding. Did you tell them you took care of your grandmother? I helped. I was there. Twice, I said. I hadn't planned to speak. The word came out on its own. Not loud, not angry. A correction, like fixing a decimal point in a load calculation. You visited twice in 3 years. Sloane looked at me. For the first time all day, she looked at me with something other than rehearsed indifference. Beneath it, fear. Not the dramatic kind. The structural kind. The kind that happens when load-bearing walls crack and you realize the whole facade is coming down. You don't know what you're talking about, she said. But her voice was thinner now. The charm had burned off like fog. Diane moved forward, pointing at me, and delivered the line she had used all day like a fire extinguisher. Brooke has always resented her sister's success. She's making a scene. Stop being dramatic. The phrase hung in the air, finally in front of witnesses. 200 people had just watched a grandmother expose a fraud and a mother defend it. Stop being dramatic didn't land the way Diane intended. It landed the way a confession lands, revealing not the accused, but the accuser. Renee sat at her table, both hands flat on the cloth, motionless. The Whitlock radiant set down her glass. Mrs. Bennet, one word, 2 syllables. Margaret's voice cut the air like a line on a blueprint, clean and final. Diane stopped. I made 3 phone calls before this wedding, Margaret continued, still seated, still unhurried. I spoke with the director of the care facility where Ruth Draper received home health support. I spoke with the alumni office at NC State. And I spoke with your mother's neighbor of 40 years, Janet Hubbard. She paused. The names landed like stones in still water. Specific, verifiable, inarguable. Diane's face lost its color all at once, the way a screen goes dark when you pull the plug. Sloane took a half step backward. Her heel caught her train. I also know about the debts, Margaret said. She said it gently, almost apologetically, the way a doctor delivers the result they wish were different. The credit cards, the personal loans, the overdraft your parents have been covering. That was the fracture point. Not the degree. Not the grandmother's story. The debts. Because the debts were the foundation of the entire performance. The reason Sloane needed Daniel, needed the Whitlocks, needed the borrowed biography. Without this marriage, the debts had no exit. And now the room knew. Daniel took one step back from the head table. In a room that quiet, it sounded like a sentence. You told my grandmother you were an engineer. Daniel, listen, you told my family you nursed your grandmother. I was trying to… What? What were you trying to do? Sloane's composure shattered the way composure always does, not gracefully. Her eyes filled. Her voice climbed. You don't understand the pressure. You don't know what it's like to have nothing and pretend you have everything. You had a sister, Daniel said. You had a sister who actually did those things, and you stole her story and put her in a clown dress so nobody would believe her. Before she left, Sloane turned to me. Not to Margaret. Not to Daniel. To me. The mask came off all the way. You always had to be better than me. Her voice was raw, stripped of every layer of performance. She sounded 20 years old, younger even. You got the grades. You got Grand's attention. You got the career. And you didn't even have to try. It just came to you. And I got nothing. I got Mom's anxiety and Dad's silence and a college I couldn't finish. And debt I couldn't explain to anyone without them looking at me like I was broken. For just a moment, I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness. Recognition. I saw the real version of her underneath the lies and the lavender in the performance. She was drowning, and she had used me as a raft. Then she straightened, and the vulnerability collapsed into something harder. This was supposed to be my day, my one day, and you couldn't even give me that. She said it like I had taken something from her. like standing silently in a linen closet in the dress she had chosen to humiliate me, while she stole my education, my grief, and my grandmother's final days, was something I had done to her. I didn't respond. The room had already responded for me. She picked up her train with both hands. She walked out the side door. She didn't look back. The door closed behind her with a click, not a slam. Somehow, that was worse. My father walked over to table 14 after that. Glenn Bennett, 60 years old. He had said 12 words to me all day. You look fine, and don't make a fuss, and your mother handles these things. He stood beside the empty chair Margaret had been sitting in, hands at his sides, his face doing something I had never seen it do before. It took him a long time to speak. I should have said something years ago. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it for anything real in a long time. I looked up at him. I wanted those words to be enough. I wanted them to be the beginning of something. An apology, a repair, a conversation that started with honesty and ended somewhere better. But they were just words. 6 of them. Too late to carry much weight. Yeah, I said. You should have. Margaret released my hand deliberately, with the sense that the gesture had served its purpose and could now be returned. You're welcome to stay, she said. Or you're welcome to go. Either way, the Whitlock family sees you clearly now. Thank you, Margaret. Don't thank me, dear. I protect my grandson. You just happen to be telling the truth. She stood, straightened her pewter jacket, and walked back to her table at the same unhurried pace she had crossed the room with 20 minutes earlier. I sat at table 14 for one more minute. The safety pin had finally given up. The orange polyester gaped at the waist. The fabric hung loose around me. I didn't reach down to fix it. I didn't tug the hem or try to make the dress look like something it was never meant to be. I just let it be what it was. Wrong color, wrong size, chosen on purpose, and I let myself be what I was. Right person, right table, right time. The caterer's wife leaned over. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen at a wedding. I almost laughed. It was the only one left, I said. She looked confused. I wasn't talking to her. I was talking to the version of myself who had believed it that morning, and the version who would never believe anything like it again. I picked up my clutch. I stood up. The dress hung like a flag nobody salutes, and I walked out. I drove back to Raleigh that night, 4 hours of MD highway, radio off, windows cracked to let the May air move through the car. I didn't cry. I didn't cry in Munt. Somewhere around the Greensboro bypass, I pulled over, changed out of the orange dress in the back seat, and left it folded on the passenger seat like a skin I had shed. The marriage was never finalized. The officiant never filed the license. Daniel never signed it. The debts were real. 4 credit cards maxed, a personal loan from a bank in Charleston, 2 months behind on her apartment lease. The degree was fiction. The career was fiction. And the grandmother's story, the worst fiction of all, because she had looked Daniel's family in the eye and claimed my grief as her credential. Margaret Whitlock withdrew the family's blessing and the trust gift the following Monday. Diane called 3 days later. I let it ring. She called again the next morning. I let that ring too. Renee texted, "This has gone too far. Call your mother." I blocked her number. Glenn sent nothing. I went back to work on Tuesday. Bridge inspection in Durham. Client meeting about a school renovation in Apex. Concrete, steel, load calculations. Things that are either true or they aren't. Things that don't pretend to be something they're not. 6 weeks later, Diane and Sloan showed up at my office. My business partner, Katie, knocked on my door. There are 2 women in the lobby who say they're your family. Want me to tell them you're in a meeting? I thought about it. Then I walked out and met them in the small conference room, the one with the whiteboard and the framed building permits. Diane had lost weight. Sloan's roots were showing. They sat on the same side of the table, close together, and Diane did the talking. We need your help. The Whitlocks are telling people what happened. Your reputation, I said, is based on a story you stole from me. Sloan has bills. The apartment, the cards. Daniel's family won't return her calls. If you could just talk to Margaret, explain that it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Mom. You planned it. I read the group chat. That landed. Diane's hands flattened on the table. Sloan stared at the whiteboard. I'm not going to talk to Margaret, I said. I'm not going to fix this. I'm not going to make calls or cover debts or rewrite the story so it's comfortable for you. I stood up. I'm also not angry. I just don't have anything left to give you. Not because you're bad people, because you used everything I gave and you used it to erase me. Diane started to speak. I watched her form the word dramatic. I watched her stop. I'm not being dramatic, I said. I'm being done. I walked back to my office, closed the door, picked up the soil report on my desk, and got back to work. The people who hand you the ugliest dress are usually the ones most afraid of how you look when you finally stand up straight. 1 orange dress, 7 shades of lavender, and 6 words from a woman who simply paid attention. You don't need a microphone to tell the truth. You just need to stop shrinking.